Welcome to Mission Oriented, a VeteranCrowd podcast that showcases veteran talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere. We are here to uncover it. Here's your host, Bob Louthen.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Mission Oriented Podcast. This is your host, Bob Louthen. My guest today is a VMI grad, so we'll try not to spend too much time talking about the cadets, but we're going to do a little bit of it. He's an Army veteran, was an Airborne Infantry Officer with the 82nd out of Fort Bragg, tours in Afghanistan, a Bush Institute veteran, presidential scholar, and now the CEO of a nonprofit called Combined Arms. My guest is Mike Hutchings. Mike, welcome to the program. Thank you for stepping into the spotlight here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here, Bob.
So I always like to talk about VMI. God, we could probably do a whole podcast telling stories about that and sharing similarities. But tell everybody, how did you end up coming to VMI? And I know the answer to this, but
So, I think as most of us know about, you get the honorary appointment and diploma if you're a legacy. And so my dad, Colonel Eric Hutchings, he was a class in 1977 and, went into a long military career after that. So grew up, military bases all around the world. But the one continual thing I always heard about and always saw the network was VMI. So I ended up going to a military high school in Front Royal, Virginia, and played some ball
Randolph-Macon? Randolph-Macon Academy? Okay.
Yep.
All right. See?
Yeah.
There's a little trivia question there. All right.
That's right. And so I ended up playing some ball there my junior and senior year, enough to get noticed by some schools. And one of the schools that reached out, thankfully, was VMI. And so from that point, they offered me a scholarship to play football. And then I hopped into the rat line. And interesting fact is my dad was actually commandant my rat year, which made for a very interesting year at VMI.
You were a heat shield coming through the Sally Port for all of our VMI people out there. Oh, Mr. Hutchings. Yep. Well, your dad just gave me a 5, 1, and 5. Let's have a conversation.
Oh, absolutely. The best thing is when he would, cancel weekends because the parade looked sloppy or whatever. And then it was just like,
it was on.
So you're right. Yep. So it was a good time. It was a good time.
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll come back to that one. What was your position in football?
I played middle linebacker. And I was fortunate enough to be able to play my freshman year and not get redshirted. And then played some my sophomore year before injuring, my knee twice and requiring surgery. So got some playing time, 2 years and was happy with that.
We were still in the Big South at that point in time, I guess.
Jeez. That's a great question. I think we were.
I think that was back in the Southern Conference, maybe about 2012, something like that.
Yeah, that was the year. We played Army versus we played Army, played West Point up at West Point, and it was televised on like ESPN2. I got some playing time in that game. And small fact is Chase Prasnicki was a quarterback for West Point. Right. And he ended up playing quarterback as I was playing middle linebacker. We were in the game at the same time. He grew up in Lexington, Virginia, as did I. We played high school ball together. So we got to play each other in college, which was pretty cool. And unfortunately, Chase was killed in action in Afghanistan, I believe around 2012 when I was over there, I think in Wardak province, which is incredibly unfortunate. But it was a cool fact at the time, us, being from the same small town and getting to play each other in some ball in the kind of big leagues, right? Yep. So it was good. It was good experience.
Well, that's a good story. Chase, a special young man.
Yep.
So you graduate from VMI. Did you always planned on going into the Army, kind of following the family footsteps? Is that had been the plan?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's all I ever wanted to do, was to be in the Army. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a career thing for me, and obviously it didn't turn out to be a career thing for me. But I did want to join, and I specifically, especially during kind of the time that I was able to join the military, it was very important for me to go downrange. I felt it as really kind of an obligation that if we're in a period of war and conflict, that felt it was kind of my duty, my obligation to take people over there and try and bring as many home as possible. So it was something I took incredibly seriously, and I consider myself fortunate to have the experience to go downrange.
You did you always want to be airborne?
Yeah, yeah. It was actually my wife and I's first date. So you know, we weren't super serious at the time, but I surprised her with skydiving. And so that was the first time that we actually hung out face to face. So jumping out of planes was something I'd always been interested in. And I have a bunch of Marine Corps friends, and they always, I think they're envious, right? Because they say it's, oh, dead technology, you guys don't use it anymore. But really, they're just jealous, right? It's a cool experience, and I always had fun doing it.
Did you go to airborne school as a cadet, or did you go after
Nope.
graduation?
Yeah, I went to all those special schools or fun schools, the Airborne Air Assault Ranger, after my cadetship.
So infantry ranger school, how was that? You think ranger school had a big impact on you?
Yeah. Ranger school. You know, I think I'm sick and twisted because I enjoyed Ranger School. It was incredibly difficult, as you know, everyone says, right? But you know, I enjoyed it because just how insane it was. I thought it was, you know, hilarious, just getting pushed continually to those breaking points, and then having to still perform, and then having to lead or having to follow depending on your roster number and who's in the queue. And I just thought it was actually a fantastic time. It broke my body and my soul, but I came out, you know, a better person because of it. And I'm lucky for the people that I was there with, that really helps pull me along during some rough weeks.
I just wonder if that experience in Lexington didn't help you get through the ranger school.
Yeah,
But
it gave, yeah.
yeah, we'll come back to that. So tell me this. You know, we're going to get into combined arms because you guys are doing some great work. But one other little thing, you know, what is a Bush Institute Veteran Presidential Scholar, and how did
Yeah.
that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as with everything kind of in my life, it's a little bit of luck, chance, opportunity. So a couple years ago, I think it was probably around 2018, 2019, the George W. Bush Institute, based out of Dallas, Texas, you know, they have a military service initiative kind of pillar. And one of the things that emerged was the concept of a presidential leader, a presidential scholar program focused specifically on the military and veteran community. So they have another program that's called PLS, which is Presidential Leadership Scholar, and that's with multiple presidents kind of working together, and they're picking kind of in that program the best and the brightest that are working on major global initiatives. But they incubated this veteran specific program, and they came up with the name. It was Stand 2 Veteran Leadership Program, and it was the first year. And I saw a post through like a second or a third degree connection on LinkedIn. I was working at GE at the time. I'd already gotten out of the service, and I saw a post of, hey, this new program, we're looking to, you know, change things for the veteran community. If you're interested, throw your name in the hat. So I did. I had no idea about the program. To be honest, I'm not sure the program had any idea about what it would look like because it was the first cohort. Somehow I was selected. I think that was when they were just scraping the bottom of the barrel and didn't have like notoriety and prestige at that point in time. But somehow I got selected for it. And there was about 33 of us as veteran presidential scholars that are, it's a 6-month kind of curriculum where you get to meet with global leaders and really have very tough and very constructive conversations, very much an open, you know, forum where kind of everything goes about the needs of the veteran and military family community. And
Who were some
yeah,
of the dignitaries that you might have met in that course of that 6 months?
General McChrystal was one
Right.
that we got some great FaceTime with and some interaction with. Obviously, the president and the first lady, got to meet them and have some conversations with them. Admiral McRaven was another one. You had, geez, and the names blanket on me right now, but the former CEO of Procter and Gamble that was also leader of the VA, and gosh, his name escapes me. I'll think of it in a second. But a lot of it was a mixture of really established military leaders, public figures. There were some elected officials in there, corporate leaders. So it was kind of a melting pot. We even had police chiefs that had gone through some very significant or adversarial circumstances under their watch, that came and talked about their experiences. So
Interesting stuff.
yeah, it's a good mix. And in that program, there's a lot of national leaders that I really became close with or learned more about the veteran community, because this was before I jumped into veteran nonprofit space. And you had people like Mary Beth Brugerman, who's the CEO and president of the Mission Continues. People like Ryan Mannion, who runs the Travis Mannion Foundation, the president. People like Saul Martinez, double amputee from overseas, that was painted in George Bush Portraits of Courage. Those were all my peers in this cohort. And so I was starstruck by a majority of them and learned a lot. And then each scholar has a personal leadership project that they have to incubate during their time in the cohort, and then present and get evaluated on at the end of the cohort. So you have to go in there with an idea. You go through a lot of kind of entrepreneurial, human-centered design thinking, innovation, minimum viable product, things like that. And they have bunker labs. Todd Connor, who was affiliated with them at the time and still is, provide some feedback, and then you present out kind of what your project is at the end. So a really fantastic program. I believe the applications are closed right now for the next cohort, but I couldn't recommend it enough to anyone out there that's interested.
Hey, you're listening to the Mission Oriented Podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest is Mike Hutchings, the CEO of Combined Arms. Mike, interesting, the Bush Institute Veterans Presidential Scholar Program. You stay in touch with the folks in your cohort still? It kind of becomes part of your network, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I see them all the time, actually. I see them at conferences. And then the Bush Institute does an annual reunion with all the cohorts. So I think they're on maybe cohort 4 now, maybe 3, maybe 4. And so every year we all get together and talk about what's going on, collaborate on major projects. But yeah, I see them all the time. And Saul Martinez, who I mentioned earlier, I just had a call with him about 24 hours ago. And then Chris Meeks, who's another scholar that was in my cohort, I'm having a call with him in about 2 hours. So we're all pretty close.
I can't overemphasize the importance of good networks. So you were involved in a couple of nonprofits before you got into Combined Arms. Let's shift gears and let's talk about why you got involved. Maybe some of this has to do with your experience in Afghanistan, but how give me the path to the nonprofit here, and then we're going to really dig in on Combined Arms, what you're doing.
Yeah. So, I transitioned out of the military, and, it was kind of a discussion with my wife at that point in time. Is I was considering a career in it, but it didn't seem like the best fit for us at the time. Wanted to sit down and start a family, wanted to be present. And the military sometimes makes that really difficult, especially where I was kind of looking to entertain in going with my career, or at least try out for some things. And so, made that decision to transition. And I was lucky, almost a year in advance before my transition, I got an offer from GE, and a contract from them to work for them. And so I went to GE after I transitioned, and had a fantastic time. It was a wonderful company and was really doing some cutting edge stuff. I got to get involved and lead some some projects for the company, standing up new business units for the company. So they gave a lot of responsibility to me, had some great mentors, and was really having a pretty good time. But this is around the time, after a few years with the company, that I saw the Bush Institute Presidential Scholar Program. And once I got wrapped up in there, it was halfway through the program, I had a mini epiphany of, I'm not operating at my full potential in what I could do at a national or a global stage in terms of impact. I feel like I'm missing a sense of purpose at GE, even though, like I said, it's a fantastic company. I think there's more that can be done in the veteran space. And so I actually resigned from GE without having a job lined up. I was halfway through the Bush Institute, probably just got done meeting with General McChrystal. It was someone, an illustrious figure that we met with. And I said, okay, like, I'm walking away from, the money, I'm walking away from corporation, and I'm going to go figure this veteran stuff out. And I remember my wife almost beat me up for it. And because I didn't talk to anyone about it, I just did it. So I resigned from my position at GE. And then I called some friends in my Bush network, the Bush Institute network, and said, hey, I don't know really much about veteran nonprofits. Where should I go? Who should I work for? And that's where I started to get kind of connected and got some jobs lined up pretty quickly.
Okay, so let's talk about combined arms, and I'm going to set the table for this and say, I don't know exactly what the number is. It varies depending on who you ask, but there's something like 40 to 50,000 veteran service organizations in the United States.
Yep.
Sometimes I think we are drowning in a sea of goodwill, if you will, in the space. A lot of these nonprofits trying to get things done, maybe competing for the same dollars, maybe overlapping. What is the model? What's going on? What's broken? What are we fixing? What's the opportunity here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll say for years, this is a recurring problem in our industry, in the nonprofit ecosystem. You see some fantastic organizations out there doing amazing things. You see some valiant efforts. But if we look kind of longitudinally at the data, is really that much changing for our veteran and military family community? I argue no. And I know that pisses a lot of people off. And I'm happy to discuss that with them further because there's a lot of emotion involved in the nonprofit ecosystem, a lot of kind of, heartstrings getting pulled. But if we're looking at everything and seeing, have we really had a transformational impact in kind of how we treat and how we serve veterans and military families, I would argue, like, I really don't think we have. So as you mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of veteran nonprofits out there. And the Bush Institute, actually, some of their guidance as you go through the curriculum is, if you're thinking of starting a new veteran nonprofit, don't. Do your market research, see what's out there. You're going to find something that's already been built. And then there's a lot of discussion about, not just the amount, but the efficacy of these nonprofits that are out here serving, and just the nonprofit community in general, whether it's veteran specific or not, and the sustainability as well. So there's a lot of questions. I wouldn't necessarily call it turmoil, but there's a lot of moving parts in the veteran nonprofit ecosystem. And Combined Arms was really built and originated to help reduce that turmoil and help to really provide a clear journey for transitioning service members and a one-stop shop to be able to always come to through life circumstances with whatever they need. So we're trying to reduce that noise in the veteran ecosystem and really solve for the two problems that we identified that I kind of just touched on. Is one is tremendous oversaturation in the marketplace. I'm a transitioning service member. I have no idea where the heck to go. I do a Google search, right. 50, 60,000 responses. What organizations are good? Who's going to do right by me? How do I know these organizations are vetted or validated or held accountable? And then the second component, besides the oversaturation, is these great organizations that are out there, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of competition, right? And so a a lot of times these organizations are not talking to one another and not collaborating. So if I'm a transitioning service member and I need multiple resources, which the data at Combined Arms shows there's about 2 to 3 resources on average a transitioning service member needs. So if I'm going and I need some help with employment, I go to an employment service organization. As I'm there, I said, oh, hey, thanks for helping me with this and, craft my resume. I also am looking into buying my first house, or I'm looking into using my GI Bill, or I have some mental health issues. Well, that organization typically is a point solution. They're experts in that, employment space. And so traditionally you get a phone number or an email to another organization, which may or may not be a good organization, which may or may not respond to you. So that's what we were also trying to do, is increase the collaboration between these organizations and to hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do. And that was kind of the genesis of Combined Arms.
If it's confusing for the veteran, it's confusing for the philanthropist too, who's trying to figure out where to direct dollars in support of this thing. So how do you go about? I fully recognize this problem. 15 years now working in the veteran space, I have, through trial and error, sorted out who the Bunker Labs of the worlds are. That's Todd Connors, right?
Yep.
And from the others that maybe aren't quite as well healed. And but how do you go about this process? I mean, you're sifting through the noise, and then once a veteran service organization sort of makes the grade, what happens?
Yeah, so Combined Arms is the only organization that I'm aware of at this point in time, or that I've ever heard about, that has a pretty extensive due diligence process. So you really kind of have two experiences. One, you have the end user experience. That's the veteran, military spouse, military child, active duty. We serve active duty, Guard Reserve as well, regardless of kind of status that they have. So that's, really connecting, getting into the system and saying what you need and connecting to that resource. And it's very much an Amazon shopping cart experience, very easy to do. And then all the organizations are curated to match with you based on your profile information. So lead generation, successful lead connection is really big with us. And so we want to reduce that noise to where if a veteran is, post 9/11, they're not seeing pre 9/11 only resources. They have no ability to connect with them because that organization can't even serve them, right? So that's what we really kind of filter through it with the back end of the technology. So that's one kind of experience of the Combined Arms model, is the end user who we are directly serving. The other is the member organization that's providing the service. So the due diligence process, we sat down with KPMG years ago, about 2015, 2016, and we said, we need to have accountability in this. We want to ensure that these are the top 1% of veteran nonprofits out there. And so they built us a process which is very similar to how a grantor, a foundation, major gift looks to invest into a company. So we look through an organization's 990s, we look through their program revenue ratios, we look at their board, we look at their executive leadership, we do keyword searches, we look for any bad media, any bad veteran reviews. It's a very comprehensive process, and the organization needs to pass that. And that's a data process, and then the democratic process of then it goes to our board of directors for a 3/4 majority vote to become a member of Combined Arms. So that's a very strenuous process. And then we have a contractual agreement with the organizations that once they pass both the data and the democratic process, that they're held to standards. Right now, each organization, when their services are requested by a veteran, they have 72 hours or less to connect to that veteran. That is the standard at Combined Arms. Right now, we have over 300 organizations around the nation, and the average of all 300 is 30 hours. So it's incredibly changing and reframing the social service ecosystem and having this ability to do so.
You're working with transitioning folks. Are you reaching into what we'll open up a can of worms here, the TAPS program, and I don't know, Skill Bridge and some of these other things to to sort of get into the pipeline of transitioning folks?
Yeah. Fantastic question. You know your stuff, right?
I've been around.
Yeah, you better. So it's a yes and no, and it's incredibly difficult, as you know. So the good thing is in Texas, we have great relationships with the active duty installations. We even have some of our employees located on base right beside the TAPS program. But it is, and I would be lying if I said otherwise, pulling teeth to make this happen.
Look, I mean,
Yeah,
we need to have
yeah,
a dialogue about this.
yeah,
The TAP program, well-intentioned
yep,
paperwork shuffling exercise that it has become.
yep,
I was in a meeting several years ago, and they had re-engineered the TAP program to make it better. And I was, one of the civilians in a room full of folks that were really sort of on the government side of the ledger, and they were very
yep,
proud of the program because they had covered all their bases and checked all of their boxes. And so I raised my hand and I said, I have a question. How much input did you get from the private sector in designing these programs? And the
yep,
answer was, we didn't. We didn't
yep.
get any input. And, it's a novel concept, folks, but you might want to go check with the customer,
Mhm.
private employers about, what kinds of things you need to do. The second thing is I think the military is terrible at stovepiping people.
Yep.
There are not a lot of jobs in the civilian sector for knuckle dragging machine gunners.
Yep.
Okay. They just
Yep.
aren't. But me as a private employer, I recognize the disciplines and the heightened sense of ethics and personal accountability and all of these other traits that candidly got baked into your DNA while you were in the military that make you a great employee. I'd like to take the raw material and say, I can train somebody to be an investment banker or an analyst or something in my particular industry, but I can't make them honest, ethical, and hardworking and
Yep.
disciplined. And so, that's where I come at it from. Anyway, I'm sorry to have kind of dominated the
No, no,
conversation
no,
for the
no.
last minute here, but I think that's a big issue that you're dealing with. And
Yep.
then so they come out and they have problems transitioning. You have financial stress, you got PTSD,
Yep.
they're coming home and having to answer questions to their spouse, the kids, all of these things, one problem begets another.
Yep. And that's really the concept of combined arms is as upstream as possible. And this is our theory of change, is that if you're taking someone who's going to go through really a cataclysmic life transition, a very significant life transition, and you're able to help them secure good employment where they're not underemployed, where they're not underpaid, something with a sense of purpose. If you're able to help them get stable housing, if you're able to help them get connected to any marital issues they may be having, marital counseling, if you're able to help them really get established and get connected to mental health resources, and you're providing this 360 wellness support bubble around them and getting them the resources that they need, that you would see really kind of a diminish and decrease I guess trajectory into some of the dark points that we see veterans go to.
Yeah, you
Right, you
go
get them
after the
everything that
root
they need.
causes of the
Yep.
problem. You don't. A lot of these other things are symptoms, right?
Yep. Definitely. And it was very interesting because, and this is going back to the Bush Institute as well, is you go on kind of field trips around the nation for each of your sessions when you meet up on a monthly basis. And one of them, we went to Fort Lewis. And so we went and toured the Starbucks headquarters, had discussions with leadership there. But then we went on base, and we were at Fort Lewis, and we got to meet with a bunch of active duty, company commanders, 3-shop battalion commander. And it was startling because I'd been out of the military for some time at this point. So I kind of forgot what it was like. But, we had an open discussion with them, and we're asking these company commanders and these, junior mid-level leadership to some kind of senior leadership, what's their plan for their transitioning service member, and wasn't on their radar.
It's the wrong person to ask. I mean,
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know,
Yep.
as an officer in the military, your job is to focus on lethality and readiness and those kinds
Train,
of
fight,
things.
win. Train, fight,
And
win. Yep.
there's no return on investment helping somebody transition. I mean,
Hmm.
candidly, you're not even going to be good at it.
Yep.
Find
100%.
somebody else and get the resources to do that. Hey,
That's right.
let me, gosh, this is a fascinating discussion, but uh question, and then I'm gonna wind this conversation down, but how many people are you able to help now? And
Yeah.
what are the critical needs for combined arms right now? What's the ask that
Yep.
we need to be putting out there to people, that how can they get involved and help?
So I'll take a minute or two to kind of paint the picture of where we're at as a company, and kind of what it looks like, because I think what you'll see is Combined Arms has a lot of kind of differentiators in the way we conduct business. Um, so Combined Arms started, as I talked about earlier, it was a small concept based out of Houston, Texas. Because it gained so much traction and we had so much throughput and so many great, success stories in helping the veteran community, we had an investment from the state of Texas um, to expand Combined Arms to cover the entire state.
Mm.
That is called the Texas Veterans Network. So we own and we operate the entire state of Texas right now, which is 1.5 million veterans, 254 counties that we cover down. So Combined Arms is the go-to for everything that veterans need in the state of Texas. So that's one component of the Combined Arms ecosystem, is we're running Texas, and in that regard, there's between 3,000 to about 3,200 new unique veterans that access Combined Arms and get connected to resources every single month.
Every month?
So every month,
Wow.
every single month. So our throughput right now, really since we started expanding, we're around the 75,000 unique veterans served. So these are one veteran coming into the system, and that's not just in Texas. The beauty of Combined Arms is we have all these resources in the state of Texas, but then we have around 60 national resources. So anywhere that you're at in the United States, we have a national resource on the system that we can connect you to services to. So it may not be as nuanced as a local, regional, or county service, but we can connect you to the Wounded Warrior projects, the Travis Mannings, the Mission Continues, Team Red, White, and Blue, Rubicon, so on and so forth. And then we also built the mental wellness app for the Bush Institute, which is called Check-In, which connects people with PTSD and traumatic brain injury and those who have experienced military sexual trauma directly into clinical care providers. So Marcus Institute of Brain Health, Mass Gen, Emory University, UCLA Rush, Combined Arms built that technology in-house as well. And we have a great partnership with the Bush Institute. So there's so much more than just kind of the
Can
Texas
you
model.
take this model and go to other states? I mean, I
Yeah,
would think that
that's
Florida,
yep,
Virginia, states with
yep,
high concentrations of veterans and a lot of folks rolling out of the military here in Virginia, where I am.
yep.
15,000 people transition out of the military just in the Hampton Roads area annually.
Yep.
Is that the model?
That is the model. And that's where I was gonna, that's the perfect segue, because that is where I think we're a little bit different in how we operate. So, we built this Texas Veterans Network, and about a year and a half ago, we had governors and senior leaders and governors' cabinets from different states started reaching out to us. Hey, we saw what your governor said about the Texas Veterans Network. We saw you in the news. How do we do that in our state? We want to be the number one place for veterans. How do we create the second now, because Texas was the first interconnected state for veterans and military families? And so we thought about it a lot as a company. And obviously there's kind of two routes. One is you do it yourself, right? That's a tremendous amount of overhead. I'm creating a facility at each location, like we have a headquarters, like in each state. I'm having to hire additional personnel. Or the other way we could do it, which is innovative in the nonprofit ecosystem, is we could do software as a service. So we could white label the technology, the proprietary technology that we built in house, and we could provide it as a state solution for State Department of Veteran Services, which each state has one. Department of Veteran Services, or they call them Department of Veteran Affairs, and each state has one. And so we decided that we would package this technology up, this white label, this product, and that we could deploy it to transform the way that veterans are served in every single state. And so it's a version of software implementation, software training, consulting to help the states become kind of more malleable and function like combined arms and adopt our due diligence process, and then maintenance and support. So we really have a technology-focused nonprofit, and in doing so, we have created earned program revenue for our business. So we're looking at diversification of our revenue to make us really sustainable as a nonprofit. So it's really just at cost that we're selling this. That's what it is, because we're a nonprofit. But what it allows us to do is to get sustained revenue coming in at a recurring basis. And so we've won the state of South Carolina. And so you have South Carolina Department of Veteran Services. General Grimsley was leading that. He just retired. But the Combined Arms technology runs the state of South Carolina. We also have the state of Louisiana utilizing the platform right now. Pilots in Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward County, pilots in Alabama right now. And then we have about 15 other states that are in our pipeline in different phases of the contractual process. So that's exactly what we're looking to do.
That's awesome. How do people get in touch with Combined Arms? How do you want them to reach out? Websites?
Yeah.
Social media?
Website, social is great, combinedarms.us. If there's any veteran or military family member that needs anything, it takes 30 seconds to create a profile. We really focus on the end user experience, so it's quick and as painless as possible. You get connected to resources, and I can guarantee you that those services will be delivered. Any state that's looking to transform from going on Excel and Microsoft Word and tracking the hundreds of thousands of veterans in their state, contact Combined Arms. We can do it for you, and we can do it together and help you reach your state goals.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on the program. We will put links to all of these websites and resources on the landing page for this episode. Really appreciate you coming out and telling the story today. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thanks, Bob. It was an absolute honor, privilege, and I hope we can continue this conversation some more in the future. I'm pretty sure we could go for hours between the Army, between VMI, between nonprofit space. I'd love to connect in person sometime in the future.
All some of my favorite topics. Okay, we'll do that.
Awesome.
Well, you've been listening to the Mission-Oriented Podcast on the VeteranCrowd Network. Thanks very much to Mike Hutchings at Combined Arms for all the good work that he's doing. You can learn more about them at our VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. And if you look at our blog page, you will see a lot of information about this organization and the great work that they're doing. Mike, I'm going to throw out Army Bravo Zulu to you for your performance today. Thanks so much. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the VeteranCrowd Network, visit us at www.veterancrowdnetwork.com.